South America. The western side of this mysterious continent holds a collection of sites that have puzzled mainstream and alternative researchers. From the ancient cave systems of Ecuador to the megalithic construction found in Bolivia and Peru, this anomalous land has been home to several ancient civilizations. Containing the most concentrated collection of unearthed sacred sites in South America, Peru is becoming an epicenter of archaeology. Why was this land chosen by our ancient ancestors? Did these mighty civilizations work with other species to energize the power of this sacred land? As the archaeological evidence mounts, the argument for an ET presence and influence in this powerful land is gaining momentum. What other evidence does this mysterious region hold that challenges the mainstream understanding of the rise of human civilizations?
In the mid-20th century, the thinking that was taught in all the schools throughout Western civilization was that civilization itself began in a place that is called the Tigris-Euphrates. New discoveries now have changed that thinking. And rather than a single cradle of civilization, scientists now believe that there were as many as 7 simultaneous cradles of civilization. Those cradles are Mesopotamia and the Tigris-Euphrates, number 1, India, number 2, China, number 3, Egypt, number 4, Europe, number 5, Mesoamerica, number 6, and Peru, number 7. Peru may be one of the last places where we find so many of the mysteries of our past undisturbed, unexcavated. Civilization has not found its way into the Peruvian mountains the way it has into Europe, into North America. And for that reason, we're only beginning to understand precisely what Peru means in these cradles of civilization.
When you get to South America and you enter countries such as Peru and Bolivia that we know are full of these incredible ancient ruins, you become aware of just how strange the mindsets of these people in the past actually were. And we're talking about peoples that go back many, many thousands of years. Some would even suggest as many as 10,000 years. And you realize that you're dealing with something wholly different.
Peru seems to be one of these world grid points in antiquity where there was a lot of activity going on. The Peruvian Incan myths talk about interaction with these star beings. And it could be that this area of Peru was a major hub, almost like a galactic airport for beings coming in and out of the earth, settling, doing trade.
You have to start looking at who these ancient Peruvians, who these ancient Bolivian peoples actually were, where they came from, whether they truly are the indigenous peoples of this area, or whether they themselves may have had help from outside, from elsewhere.
In ancient South America, there are so many indigenous cultures that we've barely scratched the surface in understanding who these people were, what their beliefs were, what their practices were, and why they did the things that they did.
Look at what the ancestors, particularly the Aymara, one of the oldest people on the planet that no one ever gives any credit to. Only 9,000 people left. They have an invented language, which the syntax can be understood by a computer. Now, where did that come from? Aymara did not develop as an organic language. It appears fully developed with a syntax that a computer can understand. That's not local.
What this tells us is that there are incredible mysteries still to be revealed within the Andes.
Situated roughly 1,700 feet above modern sea level, Nazca is home to strange geoglyphs and lines formed into the landscape. Several ET theories have surfaced since the rediscovery of these landscaped wonders and the proximity to famous pre-Diluvian sites like Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu.
Ever since the publication in the late 1960s of Eric von Daniken's book, Chariots of the Gods, has the focus been on Peru, and in particular, the Nazca Lines. They're one of the most enigmatic mysteries in the world. What are they? Why were they created? Why do they look like runways that could have been used by extraterrestrials visiting this planet?
These lines are gigantic. You know, there are two sorts of lines. Small ones, just 1 meter large, and large ones, which are 30 meters large. Now, the longest of the small lines is 23 kilometers on one line over hills and mountains straight away, going directly. We don't know why. Then the so-called large lines, the locals, they speak Spanish there, they call it las pistas, the pistas, the airstrips. They look like airstrips. And these airstrips, these pistas are gigantic. That's the real mystery of Nazca.
Another mystery from the ancient Peruvian past was unearthed in Paracas. In 1927, archaeologist Julio Tello recovered hundreds of elongated skulls from this desert peninsula. Tello's discovery created new questions around the potential extraterrestrial influence in ancient Peru.
What's so interesting about this is if it were 1 or 2 skulls, then scientists could say, okay, it's an anomaly, it's a one-off. The fact that we are still finding these skulls and the characteristics that they show us. For example, we know that these skulls typically do not have the sutures that a human skull will have. These are the places where the soft bones of an infant come together. They move so that when the baby passes through the birth canal, the head can conform to the birth canal and the mother can survive the process. What we find in the Paracas skulls is those sutures are not possible, suggesting that these beings may not have been the product of live birth.
In Paracas, what was found was that when you look at the skulls of these gods, is that the cubic capacity of the skulls is much greater than a human skull. Now, you can deform the shape of a baby's head by sitting there with a piece of cloth and slowly squeezing the skull while it's still forming. The problem is that when you look at those skulls in the museums, they look like cone heads, and there's no other way to describe it. But these skulls are different. They're unusual, that's for sure, but there's an elegance about them, as though there was part of a genetic makeup. And it does turn out that, yes, you can extend the shape of the skull, but you can't change the cubic capacity of the skull. And these skulls, which still have the red head firmly attached on them, are 30% greater cubic capacity, which means we're dealing with someone who is human-like but not quite human.
We know that these skulls have been found in other parts of the world as well. And what the historians typically say is that the people of the time will deform the baby's skulls intentionally to make it look like the skulls of beings that have been with them in the past, that had abilities, that had powers, that had insights and knowledge. And the thinking is if they can make their babies' heads look like those with the abilities, that their babies will have those abilities.
With the discovery of the elongated skulls, the Paracas skulls in the 1920s, it really started to get us to wonder if there was an extraterrestrial influence upon the ancient peoples of Peru. Could it be this is why the ancient people are so difficult to understand? Because maybe they had an extraterrestrial influence guiding the course of their civilization, and that's something we just don't quite understand in today's world.